Welcome to the Shade Chronicles, an anthology-style podcast featuring short works of fiction and serial prose, specifically with a sci-fi and horror flavor. Your hosts for the podcast are Derek Leftridge and Lawrence Trokey.
Hi, this is Derek Leftridge, and I would like to welcome you to the Shade Chronicles.
Hi, this is Lawrence Trokey, and I also want to welcome you and thank you for spending your time with us.
KK's Journal by Derek Leftridge. Like every morning since around the end of Halloween, when I arrived here, I've taken a left turn on Jefferson, then a right on Wilkins Place, then left on the Westwood Burn to Sammy's Cafeteria for breakfast. Soon, like most mornings, I'll be inhaling a plate of biscuits and gravy in my regular corner seat at the counter. Then, as usual, Tom Hall will come in, sit next to me, and he and I will kid each other about who can sit closer to the counter because of our girths. Then we will stop our teasing once the delicious, greasy food is served. Since moving here 2 months ago, I've gotten to know the majority of the residents of this quaint town. They're all basically trusting and kind. However, this town and its citizens will never be the same after I finish my job here in a little over a week and then vanish into the cold winter air. The layout of this Midwestern town is stunning, and it looks like it was sculpted out of the 1800s with its Victorian homes and Queen Anne architectural buildings. None of the homes are even relatively alike, since there are no subdivisions or homeowners groups to install the rules to limit the look or location of things. So each home has its own unique style and design. Sometimes this can be hard on the eyes when your neighbor decides to sell watermelons from his front lawn on a Saturday afternoon, or when the retired couple across the street decides to decorate their front yard as a homage to every gaudy windmill, bird feeder, and lawn ornament ever made. I guess the uniqueness is what I was drawn to put this location on my to-do list and get it checked off sooner rather than later. During this time of season, the leaves are changing to copper and lemon gold, and as the sun goes down, the evenings are filled with a brisk whisper of the Arctic chill coming from up north. The entire town is built around an active railroad track that splits the town completely in half, and even though there are small detour bridges over the tracks, most roads become a parking lot when a train comes through and life has to stop. Everyone must wait as commerce finishes its way through the town, and consequently, this is lucky for me because it gives me time and great opportunity to see my fellow townspeople and reflect on their lives and how I must affect and disrupt them, whether they like what I do or not. And by the way, I like what I do, a lot. As I sit in traffic on Wilkins, I catch a glimpse of Mrs. Tiebler working diligently to keep her already manicured lawn up to her unrealistic expectations. It is a pure obsession of hers and is always the talk of the town at Sammy's during breakfast. Mrs. Tiebler is a widow with 2 children, a daughter, Mile, and son, Trent, but they no longer live with her. Also, her husband passed away 10 years ago, and she was left with a large home and a lot of yard to groom, which she does daily, and at times it seems the entire day. A frustration of Widow Tiebler is that the neighborhood children ride up on her lawn with their bikes as they go down the sidewalk. It started out as an accident, but now with the reaction it garners, many do it on purpose. The reaction is a loud slam of the front porch screen door as Widow Tiebler leaps onto the porch to get a view of the yard violator. She then proceeds to scream at the child, whom she knows by name, and announces she will tell their parents at church on Sunday about how they are destroying private property. And without any cursing back or gestures, the children giggle and quickly pedal off down the sidewalk, leaving Widow Tiebler scowling in her front yard. Widow Tiebler has not seen her children since her husband died, since they both moved away and do not get to visit very often because of their own lives. She is 75 years old and the resident crabby old woman who lives down the road, and even though she is often upset and yelling at children, she is one of the good people on my list. What she wants to do is move from the home to a resort where her sister lives in Florida, but she cannot because she stubbornly is not able to get the house sold because although many people have looked at the house, it is priced way too high. To Widow Tiebler, the price includes history and 30 years of upkeep, so she will not budge on the amount, and this makes me smile because I'm the only one who knows she will get the price she wants and will not be a burden to anyone in this town ever again very soon. As the train finally passes and traffic begins to move along, I notice Charles McFrain rushing across the street a block ahead. He's going to work at a small office right in the middle of town, with his briefcase swinging by his side and his tie flying in the wind as he jumps up on the curb. He's a workaholic, and this is an issue with his wife and daughter because they feel the strain of the business gets him out of the home early and brings him home late. On more occasions than not, he must also work Saturdays and a lot of Sundays. Unknown to him, his wife Mallory has secretly begun to look into getting a divorce, but rest assured, this entire family will have come together in a great sea of harmony at the end of my stay. Pulling into my spot in the parking lot of Sammy's, I see Drew Monarch coming out between Sammy's and the music store next door. He must have slept in the alley between the two buildings last night again. This young man is a very sad soul. Drew is almost 18 years old and does not go to school, and also is homeless and sleeps all around town most of the time. Drew hates everything about this town and the people in it, and he has a metaphorical naughty list, and his parents are on top of the list. He was very close to his grandfather and loved hearing his grandfather's stories from his personal journal about growing up in this town as a young man. The stories included how his grandfather and his friends would walk all over town and in the woods and spend their days on adventures around the town. Particularly, Drew liked hearing the stories about how they would go into the old mine tunnels interweaving under the town, left abandoned after the mine closed 60 years ago. The stories were always about unexplained things heard and seen during every excursion, and in particular multiple stories of a person walking the tunnels, checking things off a list, then disappearing around a corner or a fork in the tunnel system. There were 3 journal entries in particular about this person being seen and followed by members of the group. His grandfather's friend Arthur had to use the tunnels during a tornado to be safe and to stay out of a storm as he was riding his bike home. As he was riding through the tunnel, he saw the man with a clipboard up ahead and turned left into another tunnel system. Arthur rode cautiously, and when he got close to the other tunnel, he heard bells in the distance but did not see the man. Other friends, Tanya and Autumn, were looking in the tunnels for gold they had heard could have been left in the mines when they saw a flash of light a few feet ahead of them. They stopped and yelled, "Hello? Is someone up there?" The light shone right in their direction, then disappeared, and then the tinkle of bells was heard. The last story was when Drew's grandfather and his friends were all in the tunnel system recording sounds and trying to talk to ghosts. The person with the clipboard and light walked briskly across the tunnel about 40 feet ahead, and they all ran in that direction of the mysterious person. In no time, they got to the point where the person was headed, and they turned left, and it was a dead end about 2 feet in from the tunnel. They all felt around for a hidden door or loose stones, but nothing. Oddly enough, one of the girls' watch alarms went off, and it was the sound of bells. And from that point on, the friends started to call the apparition the Bellman. The lore of the Bellman continued for about another 10 years until a tragic incident occurred. Like Drew's grandfather and friends, another generation of children began to venture into the tunnel, but even though there had been warnings about the dangers, the children liked to push the limits. One particular child was Anthony Scirocco, who was dared by other friends to venture into a part of the tunnel that was hastily covered with boards at the entrance. After about 2 minutes in the pitch-black tunnel, Anthony bumped into a support beam that was rotten with age and caused a collapse, and he was buried and died below the rubble. After that, large earth movers were brought into the town on flatbeds of the trains by the city, and all the known entrances were covered with tons of earth. When his grandfather passed away, Drew was given all the journals and went off into the woods and disappeared. Many say he went to the tunnels because of the secret entrances and maps were in his grandfather's journal, but none of this could be proven. When he was finally seen again in town, everyone noticed he had changed, and his parents did not seem to trust or understand him anymore. However, I know Drew has a fondness for writing stories that have a mystery and a ghost flavor to them. He spends most of his time writing in a leather-bound journal, as his grandfather did, and I know this because I gave him the journal. Not to sound repetitive, but when I am done here, Drew will have one hell of a story to write about in his own journal, along with being the main character, whether he wants to be or not. About 6 months after my visit to Middlebrook, and from how this reads, I guess my job was successful. The article is from their newspaper and written by a very special person, and I always wondered if they ever realized what truly happened. The article reads, "This Day in History," written by the Town Wordsmith, in quotes. The Middlebrook News, Final Edition, June 24th, 2030. On this beautiful summer day, I would like to reflect on the terrible event that occurred here on this date 7 months ago in our town of Middlebrook on an extremely cold day. The event I speak of is the huge ice storm that damaged one city block of business in our town, and the story was carried by many large news outlets, and they deemed it the mayhem in Middlebrook. Those of you who were living here at the time will probably remember. Unknown to all the rest of us who lived here at that time, Mrs. Tiebler and her deceased husband owned the entire section of land. We found this out after she moved away to a retirement community in Florida 2 weeks after the mayhem in Millbrook. The entire block was already signed over to Mr. McFrain and his family. Mr. McFrain owned a business in the old building that was destroyed. Mrs. Tiebler always admired Mr. McFrain's work ethic, and it reminded her of her husband. He also did all he could to keep his rent paid on time and keep the office in good shape. So to pay him back, Mrs. Tiebler put the entire block of land in his name when she left town. After the insurance was paid out and had to pay a large sum since every building in this town is a historical site, McFrain purchased Mrs. Tiebler's home for the price she wanted. He will now open up the home as a bed and breakfast and run it with his wife and daughter. Just today, I heard Mrs. McFrain is pregnant. Congratulations to them. The area that was hit hardest because of the storm celebrates a 6-month anniversary today. The two main businesses are the historical headquarters for this town and the home of this local newspaper and my boss, the Middlebrook News. So it seems that everything and everyone here has continued to benefit greatly since the ice storm. Also, the town is showing no signs of slowing in its rise on the economic front. Just take a look at the homes and businesses that are going up and that have since the devastation 6 months ago, along with the increase of commerce, be it trucks and trains. The only thing I still wonder about is where the beloved Mr. KK disappeared to since the storm. He has not been seen. Some say he died in the ice storm, since that was the last place I saw him in the shadows that early morning. The temperature changed almost instantly and freezing rain began and quickly covered the trees, power lines, and everything. The wind began to howl louder than ever, and this woke me up. The makeshift blanket I made from a discarded rug from a dumpster became ice-covered and heavy on my chest. I lifted my head to see Sammy's cafeteria, which I was sleeping behind, was on fire. The back door was open and a power line from the ceiling was flopping around and igniting everything it touched. As I was rushing to get up and bolt out of there, I heard a scream from inside the kitchen. Blake, the grandson to the owners of Sammy's, was trapped behind a burning shelving system that was blocking his way to the door and the alley and freedom. The building began to groan and crack, so I covered myself with the rug and ran to save him. When I got him, he was hysterical and screaming for me to get his grandparents who were still asleep upstairs. A loud snap and crash from the front of the building could be heard, and ice-covered roof above gave way and came down on us. All we could do was run for the alley because the grandparents were probably already dead, and we had to get out before we even ended up the same way. My memory of the last time I saw Mr. KK was right after the fire. I was dizzy from carrying Blake from the collapsing cafeteria, but I will never forget what he was wearing. He had those black boots on he always wore, and they were shined up to a gleam, and his hair and beard were whiter than I ever saw on him. He also seemed a lot heavier, too. Besides his weird attire, he was writing in a notebook while looking at me as I rolled Blake to safety. And during all this chaos, he then shut the notebook and stepped back into the smoky fog the rubble had cast over the town on that frigid December morning. He looked at me and stepped deeper into the fog. He then tapped the side of his nose at the same time, and the fog got very thick, and as I reached out to him, I must have passed out. Right before going completely out of consciousness, I heard the tinkle of bells in the distance. My questions are, what happened to him? Why did he come and stay in Middlebrook anyway? Did he somehow have anything to do with the freak storm? Those are a few of the questions I wish could be answered. This article was written by the town wordsmith, who is Middlebrook's very own Drew Monarch, the resident town historian.